Moving on to the next, we have a young lady. She's going to be talking to us about the lion you weren't looking for. Her topic is the lion you weren't looking for. I'm very intrigued. So she is the founder of Neurodiverse Generation. She is a podcast host, an actress, dancer, and neurodiversity speaker.
I'm thrilled to be here today. Thank you so much, Brittany. So I am coming to you guys live from the Middle East in amidst the start of World War III, as it were. I moved here nearly 2 months ago, and it truly broke my heart to do so. Despite all the corrupt politicians, the crime rates, the crumbling infrastructure, I am a true patriot at heart. And I would never have left South Africa if not for the crumbling economy. Why? Because we have riches that other places can only dream of. There is a huge amount of natural wealth that stems from our homeland. I was blessed enough to visit the Kruger almost annually growing up, but it was only 2 years ago that I finally got to see a live, like a living leopard in the wild in the Kruger. It was only 2 years ago. He was far away, but it was a whole thing for me. And that's just one of our big five. See, back in South Africa, you could spend years searching for certain animals and never once see them in the wild, like the so-called impossible five. And that struck me quite deeply because immigrating felt the same. Suddenly, I was the rare one. I was the outsider, the one people stared at but didn't quite know how to place. And that's when I realized that being neurodiverse often feels exactly like that. Rare, extraordinary, sometimes misunderstood, sometimes celebrated, but always worth seeing. But do you think that the impossible five are cognizant of their rarity? Do you think that the white lion recognizes his worth, his value? Or would he first notice all the things that made him different? Impossible to manage in classrooms. Impossible to fit into tiny workplace boxes. Impossible to understand. That's how we're described. Impossible, unless we translate ourselves into something more palatable. But in Africa, the impossible five aren't called impossible because they fail. They're called impossible because it is so rare and so extraordinary to get to see one in the wild, to encounter one for yourself. Wow, what an experience. I mean, a white lion is not impossible because it doesn't exist. It's impossible because it does. And its very existence feels like a miracle. And that's when it hit me. Being neurodiverse is not about being too much or too strange or too difficult even. It's about being extraordinary in a world that sometimes lacks the patience or the eyes even to recognize it. I was once sitting around a campfire at holiday camp where everyone was doing the usual icebreaker. What's your hidden talent? What's the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten? And when it came to me, I joked, I can remember the exact order of words from conversations I had from when I was 7 years old, or I can remember exactly what I was wearing on one particular day in my history growing up. This could be 15 years ago. Nothing in particular interesting happened on that day, but you best believe I remember what I was wearing. And it's useless, but it's impressive to my family. And they then proceeded to tease me that at least my mommy thought I was Bethel. And I told them to humble themselves, especially considering a lot of them had faces only a mother could love. The counselors took away my tuck the next day, and the rest of the group laughed. They clapped. They thought I was hilarious. They called me quirky. But here's the twist. That so-called useless trait, that skill is the very thing that makes me a good researcher. It's what makes me a good storyteller. It's what makes me a critical thinker. I notice patterns that other people frequently miss. I can trace threads of meaning back years. And what if they dismissed it as a party trick? What if they had just thrown it away? That was my white lion. It was rare. It was striking. It was impossible to ignore if you really look. And yet, in that moment, I was reminded of something quite painful. Society often wants the show, but not the truth. They'll applaud the oddity, but miss the wisdom. So think about the impossible five for a minute. The African wild dog. He's relentless. He is brilliant in his cooperation. The caracal can leap 2 meters into the air to snatch birds in flight. The okapi is a half zebra, half giraffe. It's straight out of mythology. I don't even want to know how that came about. But none of them are convenient. None of them fit neatly into expectation. And yet, isn't that what makes them unforgettable? Not their willingness to blend in, but their refusal to be anything other than themselves. Neurodiverse voices are much the same. We can be sharp, we can be relentless, we can be confusing, even uncomfortable. But what we bring to the table is extraordinary if only people are willing to sit with us at the table for long enough to see it. Here's the deeper truth. For too long, the world has treated us like creatures best left in the shadows, too rare to bother understanding, too strange to bring into the light. But stigma only thrives in the dark. When people dismiss ADHD as laziness, autism as coldness, anxiety as weakness, what they're really saying is, we don't want to do the work of understanding you. But what happens when you encounter an impossible five animal? You stop, you hold your breath, you pay attention. And isn't that the power of rarity? It awakens wonder, it commands respect. Imagine if we treated people the same way. Imagine if, when faced with difference, with neurodiversity, with someone who doesn't move or think the way we expect, we didn't rush past or dismiss them as difficult. Imagine if we stopped, held our breath, paid attention. What extraordinary truths would we find then? Because difference isn't a barrier to connection. It is the very thing that makes the encounter unforgettable. And Derek, oh my gosh, you just lined me up perfectly with your talk about psychological safety. You really, man, you set the stage for me with this perfectly. I appreciate it. It was a difficult one to follow, but that is what we are asking of the world. We're not asking for tolerance anymore. We're not asking for polite nods anymore, but true witnessing, to be seen, to be valued, to be learned from. Tolerance still keeps us at arm's length, a box ticked on a diversity checklist. Polite nods allow us to speak, but without anyone truly hearing. And what we're asking for is the courage of presence, to sit with our stories long enough to feel their weight, to see our struggles and our brilliance in the same frame. True witnessing means acknowledging that neurodiverse lives are not footnotes, but full chapters in the human story. It means moving beyond acceptance into engagement, beyond stereotypes into genuine curiosity. It means seeing us not as broken versions of what's normal, but as complete, complex beings with perspectives that can expand the world if we'll let them. We don't want to be endured. We want to be known. We want to be valued. We want to be remembered. I think that's what most of us want, right? So, to each of you preparing to speak for the rest of the day, don't worry about being neat. Don't worry about being digestible. The audience does not need another predictable talk, especially this one. They need an encounter with the impossible. Channel the caracal, leap higher than they expect. Channel the African wild dog, show the strength of working in fierce, loyal packs. Channel the okapi, embrace the contradictions that make you forgettable. Unforgettable, not forgettable, unforgettable. And most of all, channel the white lion. Let your very existence, your story, your perspective remind the world of this truth. What they once called impossible was never impossible at all. It was just rare, and rare things are worth seeing. They're worth witnessing. Thank you.